This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Dialogue with the Delegation here on WSRE PBS. I'm Lloyd Patterson. The forecast is anything but sunny as Florida lawmakers assemble in Tallahassee for the 2011 session in just a few weeks. Now, things could get ugly as lawmakers grapple with a budget deficit of several $billion, a weak employment picture, and a new governor to work with. We can join the conversation right now by emailing questions to us at WSRE.org or call them in at 484-1200 or 1-800-239-WSRE. Our lineup tonight, Senator Don Gates of Niceville. He's going to have a full plate in the upcoming session. He chairs the Reapportionment Committee and the Budget Subcommittee on Transportation, Tourism, and Economic Development. District 4 encompasses coastal areas from Escambia to east to Bay County. Senator Gates was elected in '06. Newly elected Senator Greg Evers of Baker is chairing the Criminal Justice Committee and is Vice Chair of Transportation. His District 2 covers the territory from northern Escambia to Bay counties. He formerly served in the Florida House. Representative Clay Ford of Gulf Breeze came through office through a special election in '07. He chairs the House Energy and Utilities Subcommittee. District 3 includes the city of Gulf Breeze and a portion of the Pensacola area, too. Doug Broxson of Gulf Breeze, the Tiger Point area, is going to his first legislative assembly since his election in November. The new District 3 representative serves on the Finance and Tax Committee, among other assignments. His district includes parts of Escambia, Okaloosa, Santa Rosa, and Okaloosa, Santa Rosa counties, including Pace and Milton. And newly elected Representative Clay Ingram is assigned to the Education and Agriculture and Natural Resources Appropriations Subcommittee. His District 2 covers parts of Escambia County. In District 5, Representative Brad Drake and District 4, Representative Matt Gates, who are usually on these programs, were unable to join us here tonight. Again, your questions can be called in right now or emailed to us at questionswsre.org. Start with Senator Gates. Are you looking forward to this upcoming session?
Well, I'm looking forward to walking over hot coals. As you indicated, things could get ugly, but frankly, I think this is also an opportunity for us. A good friend of mine said the other day that this recession has caused him to cut costs he didn't even have, didn't even know. And so I think there's an opportunity for us now to tweezer through government and look for those aspects of government that have been overtaken by time, that maybe aren't as important now, that maybe are overfunded, and make sure that we fund and emphasize critical services that help create jobs, but have the courage and boldness to cut in those areas that government no longer needs to be involved in at a time when families and businesses are cutting back too. Senator Evers, your take on the upcoming session.
Boy, I think this upcoming session is going to be a real good session for us, especially here in the Panhandle. With the leadership of Senator Gates and working on the BP oil spill and actually the incentivizing of the jobs that we're hoping to bring in and the other legislation that we're going to pass as far as getting the regulation off of the entrepreneurs and giving them the ability to create these jobs and working with the governor to create 700,000 new jobs in the state of Florida. I'm looking very forward to serving this year.
Thank you. Clay Ford, how do you see things?
Well, Lord, I think we have a mandate. We always talk about having mandates, but I think our mandate this time is to go to Tallahassee, don't raise taxes, find some jobs, develop our economy so we can put people back to work. You know, the one thing we have to do is pass a balanced budget. We don't have to pass any other bills. Those of us in the House only get to introduce 6 bills anyway. The senators have more leeway to look at a larger number of bills. But we don't have to introduce 6 bills, but we do have to go over and build a budget. That's very difficult when we're $4 billion short. So that's going to require that we make some cuts that we'd rather not make. We want to try to make those so they're oriented toward bringing jobs here and having heart at the same time, so we don't cut those things any more than absolutely necessary that impact on social services for our citizens.
Thank you. Doug Broxson, you a little intimidated?
Well, it's going to be a great time. We do have an opportunity to do something that has not been done in a while. We're going to have to balance the budget, which we constitutionally have to do, but we're going to show the people that we can live on less money, just like they are. And hopefully, legislative groups in the future will not, when we do better, and we're going to do better in the economy, that we won't be tempted to grow government where we cannot cut it back. We've asked every one of our departments that come before us in committee to show us where they can save 15%. And if we can do that, we can demonstrate that Florida can cut its budget.
Thank you. Clay Ingram?
Yeah, Lloyd, first of all, thank you for having us here and having the chance to interact with our constituents and know what's on their mind going into the session. This is going to be a very challenging time. There have been much easier and simpler times to have served in the legislature, but I don't think any of us would pass up the chance to be here now at a time when the budget's going to be a tremendous challenge, and we're going to have to make hard decisions. I mean, that's why we ran, was to be here and to make these tough decisions on behalf of the people that we represent. Obviously, we all ran on jobs, and I think we're very fortunate to have a governor who's committed to making the economy in Florida recover through cutting regulation and taxes. Also, the Speaker of the House and the Senate President are just as committed to keeping taxes low. They've all stated publicly that no way, no how will any tax increase or anything of that nature even sniff of passing the House or Senate, and that's a great thing. So challenging times, we're excited to be here. I know I am, and can't wait to get to work, to borrow a phrase.
Thank you. This is Dialogue with the Delegation here on WSRE PBS, and if you have questions, you see the information on the screen. We have quite a few issues to cover here. First of all, Pensacola viewer asks, do you have any BP updates? BP is telling, or the Gulf Coast Claims Group is telling us that interim claims will start being paid in February. Many of us were led to believe that they were reviewing interim claims all these weeks, but now we find out they were only working on the quick payments. Interim claims are not being reviewed at this time, according to local office.
Well, Ken Feinberg, who's the head of the Gulf Coast Claims Facility, is a smooth talker. And I only wish that the performance of the claims facility matched the promises that he made to all of us representing the people of Northwest Florida. Sadly, that hasn't been the case. Unfortunately, I think what we're seeing is delay. We're seeing untimely payments, uneven payments, so that some people who have stories exactly like others aren't getting paid. And also, there's a disturbing lack of transparency, Lloyd. All of us are unused to a circumstance where we can't find out what's happening to the problems and concerns of our constituents. And the Gulf Coast Claims Facility and Ken Feinberg have simply said to us, we don't have to tell you what's happening. Well, a number of us have been working behind the scenes. We don't have authority over Ken Feinberg. He reminds us he works for the fellow at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, not for us. But I think there may be the possibility of bringing legal action because of the lack of transparency. I think they've done a lousy job, and I think this underscores the reason why we can't count on the federal government to pull us out of the ditch. We have to count on ourselves and an interstate compact among the states who would be affected by a problem like this.
Okay, other comments on the BP, the claim situation? Go ahead.
I wrote to Mr. Feinberg. I met him 2 weeks ago and talked to him about our challenge here. I told him the system is broken. After thinking about it, I discovered that really he had perfected a system not to pay claims. When he took over on August 23rd, he virtually shut down the Gulf Coast Claims Facility where they were intake secretaries. They took the information, they faxed it or emailed it to Dublin, Ohio. I encouraged him to set up a regional office here to allow these 1,500 adjusters who are fine people, part of every community, to do their job, to walk people in through the process, from signing in to doing the application to seeing that if they deserve payment. They're the best people to do that. They're hired to do that. They've worked dozens of storms. Let them do their job and quit sending this to out of state, to Dublin, Ohio, where they have just a handful of people making these decisions.
It was safe to say no one is very happy with the way BP has handled things through the Gulf Coast Claims Office.
I was going to say, I think it's important to separate BP from the Federal Claims Administrator.
Right.
And I think that's just a very important distinction to make. And I'm not saying that BP is completely blameless, but the frustration I've seen from constituents as I've talked to them is that it's the federal claims administrator that is giving them the most heartache and preventing payouts from occurring.
Yeah, BP just being shorthand for the big oil spill, right? Though I understand what you're saying. Clay Ford.
I was dismayed to read in the paper either this morning or yesterday morning that one of the claims that received rapid payment was one in which BP had a side discussion with somebody who was a normal contract with BP. That claim was paid offline. None of the other payments had been paid. I'm dismayed about the lack of transparency that Senator Gates noted. I see no reason why there couldn't be a public list of all claims filed, the amount of the claim, and when the last action was taken on that claim. That's transparency. There's no reason why that can't be done. None of the proceedings are secret. None of the claims are secret. No reason why that couldn't be done all along.
All right, we've been talking about, they've been responding to the question about an update on the claims process from the oil spill. We could come back, we may probably come back to this later in the hour, but for now, let's move on to another issue, and this one is regarding gun control. And a viewer wants to know, regarding the proposed open carry gun law, are you concerned about public shootouts where innocent bystanders are shot by gun carriers who don't hit their targets?
Absolutely not, Lloyd. I'm not concerned with that at all. The open carry bill that I have filed, actually brings it to the forefront that you have to have a concealed weapons permit. You have to go through the process of being background checked, fingerprinted, and you have to actually take a class on gun safety. And, back when we passed the Castle Doctrine bill back several years back, folks were saying you're going to have shootouts in the streets, you're going to have folks, killing one another. It hasn't happened. And actually this bill will make it safer because you will know if a person has their weapon open. I mean, you'll know who's carrying. But it also makes everyone safer. If you go to an outside market or something and someone's standing next to you with a pistol on their side and a perpetrator comes up and going to rob somebody, chances are he's not going to rob either one of you because there's equal force there. So he's going to move on down the street.
All right. Other comments on the gun bill? Okay. Let's move on. A question from another viewer says, legislative proposals that lack any exception for a woman's life or the discovery of fetal anomalies that force women to continue dangerous pregnancies are being passed in many states. If Republicans favor less intrusive government in our personal lives, will Florida's legislature impose greater restrictions on women's reproductive health?
The legislative proposals that are before us right now vary to a great extent. But I will tell you that Representative Matt Gaetz, who I have some connection with, is sponsoring legislation this year, which passed last year, but sadly the governor vetoed it, to prevent public dollars, taxpayer dollars, from being used to finance abortions when the mother's life is not in danger. Even Obamacare provides an option for states to say, we don't want to use our Medicaid dollars and our health care dollars that ought to be used for vulnerable citizens, for children and pregnant women and others who really need health care. We don't want that money to be drained away to finance abortions, public dollars. And so Representative Gaetz is sponsoring legislation to invoke what at the federal level is called the Hyde Amendment. It's been federal law for years as far as that's concerned, to see if we can restrict abortions in Florida that would be sponsored by taxpayer dollars. No matter how you feel about abortion, if you're pro-choice or you're pro-life, I think there's a consensus that we don't want taxpayer funds being used to support unnecessary abortions.
Other comments on that? You mentioned Obamacare a moment ago, and there is a question in here regarding the federal judge's decision in Pensacola to declare it unconstitutional. Did that ruling come as a surprise? Do you welcome it? You like it, not like it? Greg Evers.
I think me personally, I love it. And my constituents actually think it's a great thing. And they actually feel like they won one, that big government is not taking them down the long, cherry road. And so with that, I said, I appreciate the judge's decision.
Other comments, Clay Ingram?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important we have that decision now, and I think it's important as this Obamacare goes through the appeals process that Republicans, and I'd encourage our constituents to continue to call, especially the federal officials, to keep the heat on. Obviously, there are some people that are in favor of Obamacare, but overwhelmingly in my district, folks are opposed to it. So let's keep the heat on. This is a tremendous step in the right direction, but let's keep it up.
All right, Clay Ford.
I want to point out that the federal judge here in Pensacola that just ruled was the second federal judge to rule that it was unconstitutional. I think the other ruling was in Virginia. I think ultimately it's going to be decided either by the Court of Appeals or by the Supreme Court, and I suspect by the U.S. Supreme Court. It's a question how long it's going to take to get there. The basis of his ruling was that it's unconstitutional to require poor people, for instance, who can't afford insurance, to buy it, and if they don't, you get penalized, a financial penalty for that, and it's just unconstitutional as well as unfair.
All right. I believe that this ruling by Judge Vinson yesterday proves that the American system works. There are some people who've kind of given up, and they've said, well, the judiciary is always dominated by liberals who, want to do the wrong thing. Well, here you've got a courageous federal judge who did the right thing. It proves that the checks and balances that our founders put in the Constitution work. Undoubtedly, there will be an appeal by the Obama administration, and I can tell you that Senator Evers and I are co-sponsoring with our Senate President, Mike Herodopoulos, legislation to amend the Florida Constitution to protect every citizen of this state from having to be penalized or punished if they don't buy health insurance that the federal government mandates. I take my hat off to Bill McCollum for originally bringing this suit against the federal government, and I'm going to stand next to Pam Bondi along with Senator Herodopoulos and our other delegation members to fight for this all the way to the Supreme Court. This is the worst intrusion. Obamacare was the worst intrusion on individual rights and the federal-state system of balance in my lifetime. I'm glad for Judge Vinson's ruling, and we'll fight it all the way to the Supreme Court to uphold that ruling.
Of course, Florida wasn't in that, isn't the only one involved in that suit either. There are a lot of states that signed on and also welcomed the ruling by the judge. Other comments on the Obamacare? Okay, Doug Broxson.
In 1989, Medicaid in Florida was 6% of our budget. This coming year is going to approach 30%. Predictions are if this Obamacare goes through, it could approach 40%. We simply, as a government, cannot have an unlimited source of money for Medicare or health insurance. And we've got to do something. We want Florida to have the ability to pattern their own system and not have one that's dictated by the federal government.
Speaking of Medicaid, I just noticed this viewer in Pace says the 800 number for Medicaid food stamps has been busy constantly for 2 weeks. What can be done about this?
Well, one thing that your listener can do is contact any of our offices, and we'll try to help. That happens to be Senator Evers' district, but you can contact me or Senator Evers, any of our House members, and we'll try to get the information that your viewer needs.
All right.
Absolutely, because, I'm not sure why the phone would be tied up for the past week, but, I'm sure there's a logical explanation, and, sometimes it just makes it go better when a senator or representative calls and says...
You have a way of breaking the log jam.
Well, yeah, break things loose.
Okay. You are watching Dialogue with the Delegation on WSRE, PBS for the Gulf Coast. Tonight, we are talking with the members of the delegation, 5 of them anyway, who will be going to Tallahassee in a few weeks for the session, a session that's got big decisions to make about the budget and many other important issues. Viewer from the area says more than 60% of voters endorsed the Fair District amendments last November, but Governor Scott recently pulled back a request for federal approval of the amendment, which is required to ensure that they're not discriminatory. What will you do to ensure that the wishes of Florida's electorate are honored and stop the shameful use of our tax money to fight those wishes? And Don Gates, you're the chairman of the Reapportionment Committee in the Senate. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. Apparently, the viewer was one of those who voted for 5 and 6. I will say this, that Governor Scott's decision to withdraw 5 and 6 from federal pre-clearance has nothing to do with how we will proceed with the reapportionment process in the Senate Reapportionment Committee, and I dare say in the House Reapportionment Committee when it's constituted. We know we have a long, involved process of clearing a number of legal hurdles. We're going to have the most open, transparent, interactive redistricting process in American history in Florida this year. We're going to make sure that anybody who wants to can come to a public hearing, including hearings here in Northwest Florida, to say, here's how I think districting ought to occur. And we're also setting up an interactive website so that all the demographic information from the census that we use to draw district lines and the software that we use to actually work the lines and make sure that there's an equal number of voters in each district and that we comply with Amendments 5 and 6 and the other requirements of state and federal law, that's all going to be on the web, available so that 19 million Floridians can audit this process. It will be open, transparent, and interactive. And we intend to abide by the law. I grant you that Amendments 5 and 6 are mutually inconsistent. They're difficult to understand. They create more challenges for a redistricting process than have ever been imposed on any state in the history of the Union. But we're still going to do our best efforts, and our efforts will be reviewed by the Supreme Court and at the federal level. So I don't think that your listener has anything to worry about in terms of the federal pre-clearance process. Senator Evers and I, who both serve on the Reapportionment Committee, know that we have to pre-clear any map, any draft that goes forward to the voters of Florida before we can call it a day. All of those maps have to be pre-cleared at the state level and at the federal level by the relevant courts.
All right, reapportionment, other comments? Okay, let's move on to our next issue. When will politicians start putting the county, state, and city before party? It's become a joke how most major legislation is decided along party lines. Seems you guys are more worried about re-elections and doing what's right for the country. I don't know, there's not a specific issue in here, but would anybody, this is the kind of sentiment you sometimes hear people offer. Clay Ingram, go ahead.
If I might, I have maybe a little different point of view being newly elected, but you know, I chose the Republican Party because it stood for all of the things that I believed in: lower taxes and less government, you know, increased personal freedom and personal responsibility. So obviously I'm a conservative, and then chose party because that party, the planks of the Republican Party, you know, supported all the things I believed in. So I'm not ashamed that you know, as I select legislation to sponsor, that it falls within those guidelines, and I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. But I just wanted to put forth that there's a reason that you know, I'm a member of the party that I'm a member of.
All right, very good. Clay Ford, go ahead.
Thank you, Lloyd. You know, I think that we have an obligation. The people this time elected 5 more Republicans than they had in the last election to the House, 2 more Republicans than they did the time before to the Senate. And we have what they call a supermajority, the Republican Party does. But I think that brings with it an obligation that we be fair to the minority party. And I think I've heard a commitment from both the Speaker of the House and from the President of the Senate that we're going to bend over backwards to be sure that the minority party has an opportunity to voice its ideas and be able to speak to those on the floor of both houses. And we're going to try to be as fair as we can, regardless of numbers elected from either party. The time is past to deal with things in just a partisan issue. We've got to be able to work together.
Okay, now the next issue deals with immigration and illegals, and it's been an issue that's been up and down, and you guys know it well. Would you support a bill that requires all jail inductees to be screened for citizenship status, and if found to be illegally present, be deported after serving their sentence? And would you support a bill that would require employers to screen existing and new hire employees for citizenship status and found to be illegally? I thought they already have to do that, don't they?
Well, the governor issued an executive order that said that E-Verify, which is referenced in the second part of your viewer's question, be applied to all state workers. The answer to your viewer's question from me is, I'm one of the sponsors of both of those bills. First, to make sure that we don't use taxpayers' dollars here in Florida to keep illegal aliens in our jails when we can deport them and send them back to their own country and let them be punished there. I joined Senator Bennett in sponsoring that bill. And the E-Verify bill, I've joined in sponsoring that one as well. Look, there are a lot of ways to look at the immigration question. We're all the children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren of immigrants. But at this time in our country's history, we've got to make sure that we take care of America's needs with America's resources. It's got to be time that we quit draining away our resources, whether in education or healthcare or anywhere else, for illegal aliens. So I'm a sponsor of both of those bills.
Thank you. Other comments on this?
Well, also, I'm a sponsor of the Arizona style, and co-sponsor with Senator Bennett and Senator Gates on both the other issues. But it really comes down home to me from the standpoint, because of the fact that I do grow strawberries, there is a difference between immigration. Actually, it costs me about $10,000 a year to bring in 2 workers to work with my strawberries. I've been doing it for 15 years. And those folks pay taxes, just like we do. They receive just the same benefits that we do because they're paying their money, just like we do. Where our problem is the illegals and the disadvantage that it puts me at in my business from the standpoint you hire an illegal and you pay him $3 an hour or $4 or $5 an hour, and I'm paying $10 an hour. That puts me at a tremendous disadvantage. And there's a process by which to do it right, and there's a process by which you do it wrong. And that's the reason that ultimately the employers will have to bear the burden if they don't go through the proper process. And it will allow more Floridians to go to work. And so I think you know, from the savings that we'll receive on the education, the Medicaid, the other things that goes along with the illegal immigration, that's our burden.
Okay. Doug Broxson.
Part of the frustration that not only Florida but Arizona and many states has, there's plenty of laws on the books, federal laws, to take care of the immigration problem. They simply are not enforced. But they look to the states to pick up the bill for all the services that these families and their extended families bring. And we simply are at a point, not only in Florida, but many states, where we cannot afford to do that any longer.
Okay. Other comments on this? We're talking to our legislators from this area prior to them heading off to the state capitol to make some big decisions on the Florida budget and other important issues. And we'll move on to our next question here. This has to do with corporate taxes, closing corporate loopholes so that all businesses pay the same rate would allow Florida to reduce the corporate tax rate from 5.5 to 4.5%, according to this group. Current loopholes include various exemptions, including exclusions and subsidies. Combined reporting would recover another $376 million. Let's ask you about changes in business corporate tax that Florida needs to make. Do you see where this viewer is going?
I think in order for Florida to be competitive with the states around us, ultimately we're going to have to totally do away with the corporate taxes that's having to be paid by the corporations here in the state of Florida. In order for us to be competitive, and I don't think you can do it in 1 year, but I think over a stair step of time, it will have to be reduced to zero. By allowing that, it will allow for the entrepreneurship for us to actually build jobs and allow for these folks to get out, go to work, and ultimately we will recoup way more than the corporate income tax.
Corporate income tax, Clay Ford.
Lloyd, you know, one of the 4 largest sources of general revenue in Florida is from corporate taxes. You know, sometimes they get a bad rap and people think corporations don't pay taxes, but they really do. Like I say, one of the largest donors to general revenues that we have. Right now, the economy being what it is, how we levy corporate taxes and the use of incentives to lower taxes for those corporations who bring new jobs to Florida is one of the ways that we can help develop our economy. Once we've brought our economy back to full speed and our unemployment back to a number that's livable, at that time, I agree with Senator Evers, we need to take a look at lowering corporate taxes, but you got to be able to replace them with something. And we can do that through our general revenues from other sources as our economy improves.
And Lloyd, you know, one person's corporate tax loophole is the next person's economic development, job creation incentive. I'm sponsoring legislation this year, the Oil Spill Economic Recovery Act, which would provide substantial tax reductions for businesses that will come into Northwest Florida and help us create a more diversified economy. You know, we're a two-trick pony, the military and tourism. And when anything happens to either one, we're on our knees. So we need economic diversification. So I have legislation that would allow substantial tax reductions and incentives if businesses will come here to our area and locate and bring jobs. Now, is that a tax loophole or is that a job creation incentive? So I think we want to be careful. Some things, some policies that we have that some people consider loopholes are really job creation incentives. We tried in the Senate 2 years ago to eliminate some of the so-called loopholes, and we got about halfway through eliminating so-called loopholes when a senior Democratic senator stood up in the back and said, wait a minute, when you eliminate tax reductions, no sales tax on Super Bowl tickets and no sales tax on skyboxes, that's how I brought 2 Super Bowls to Florida, she said. Don't do that. So sometimes it's even our Democratic friends who will stand up for corporate tax loopholes when it's their idea and when it brings jobs to Florida.
Okay. When you were campaigning, you, I think, referring to all the candidates, promised to get involved in the rollback of driver's license registration and fishing fees, which were increased recently. We don't see that you're doing anything on that. Has anything been done?
Yeah, it sure has been. I voted against increasing the fishing fees. In fact, I was assisted by members of the delegation here to roll that back. And as far as driver's license fees and auto registration fees, Senator Thrasher joined me in introducing legislation to roll those back. We want to do it again this year if we can find some way to make deeper cuts elsewhere in government expenditures so that we can reduce those fees, because those fees affect people who are ordinary Floridians going back and forth to work and taking their kids to school and going to the doctor. So absolutely, those fees ought to be reduced, and we've taken action to file bills to do that very thing.
Yes.
Very good. Next question: is there any hope for help for the homeowners of Northwest Florida with their homeowners insurance? Most companies writing in this area, or if they do, the cost is extremely high. Some of these writing companies are not stable enough to take in all the risk. What's going on with property insurance? Doug Broxson.
Well, what we have is we have a company that's owned by the people of Florida, citizens, that has grown to be the largest insurance company in Florida. They're not stable. If we had a major storm, it would break not only citizens, but it would break many of the citizens of Florida. We have, through a process, we've seen really good companies get out of the marketplace and smaller companies come in and replace them. Many of these companies are not doing well now, and we haven't had a storm in 5 years. So we've got to do something. We've got to encourage new capital to come into the state for people to write more property. And if we do that, we can decrease the size of citizens, and the liability on the citizens of this state will be reduced.
Thank you. Other property insurance questions? Next question deals with the proposals to close the gap in income and expenditures in the state of Florida. Do they support the proposed closing of multiple state parks in order to balance the budget? I believe Perdido Key State Park is one on the list. Your feelings about closing state parks to save money?
Lloyd, I was actually, and some of the other members might have been in Senate meetings, but I was in the agriculture appropriations meeting when that proposal was made of closing certain state parks. And I'll just say this, and I don't think they're anywhere close to making a decision on that. There's a new secretary in place, or several new secretaries in place at different agencies. Those secretaries hadn't seen the proposals that the bureaucrats had put into place, and so no decisions had been made. That was one of the ideas that had been thrown out, and so whether or not that's actually proposed when the time comes. To back up a little bit and give more background information, the agencies were asked to voluntarily come up with ways to reduce their budgets, and that was one of the ways that one of the agencies came up, with reducing their own budget. Again, as the new secretary looks at that proposal, that may be scrapped entirely. It also should be said that the chairman of that committee, that appropriations committee, has also said that she wasn't for or against that proposal, but was open to hearing everything at that time. So whether or not we've actually taken a step toward that, probably it has not been decided. I just it's important that people understand that was thrown out, is not necessarily on the table.
It's not a finalized deal by any means.
No.
But with $3 to $4 billion short, somebody's going to come out of this session feeling burned, aren't they? You can't make up that kind of revenue shortfall without somebody having to sacrifice someplace, do you?
Well, everybody's in favor, Lloyd, of reducing the size of government, just not the programs that's their favorite. And we politicians, we in office, are not immune from that. There are things in healthcare and education, areas that I have great concern about, in economic development, public safety, that I hope don't get cut. But the hard fact is, when you're $3.62 billion less in revenue this year than we were last year, the checks aren't going to be good at the bank if we keep writing checks in the same amount. So this isn't politic to say, this isn't pleasant to say, but it's truthful, and that is there will be deep cuts in state spending, just like there are deep cuts in the discretionary spending of every family and even some of the necessary spending of small businesses in Northwest Florida. So is it possible that there will be cuts in state parks? It's possible. Am I in favor of it as somebody who loves to go to state parks and lives near one? Absolutely not. But you come down to choices. And to be responsible, here are the choices. Do we thin the soup in the school cafeteria? Do we cut back on the number of teachers in the classroom? Do we say to our elderly, our parents and grandparents in nursing homes, we don't have the money for your medication? Or do we shorten the hours in state parks? When you put it that way, then it may be a different kind of question. But you're absolutely right, Lloyd. We are going to make deep cuts. We have to make them. It's responsible to make them.
Thank you. And along those lines, will you be reviewing sales tax exemptions in order to produce more revenue for the state?
Absolutely not. Our Senate President, Mike Herodopoulos, has said, faced with this kind of a shortfall, we have two choices: increase taxes or cut spending. And to thunderous applause from the most conservative Senate in decades, Mike Herodopoulos said, we're going to cut spending. And again, one person's sales tax loophole is another person's economic development incentive. The very water we drink, there's legislation that's been proposed, Lloyd, that it ought to be taxed, that we ought not to have a tax break for water that we drink. It ought to be taxed. Well, I'm not in favor of increasing taxes on hardworking Floridians when they're having a hard time making it through the month right now.
All right, thank you very much. Continuing now with more questions from Northwest Florida viewers. Why are you trying to mess with state employees' retirement pensions? And there are several questions about state-backed pensions.
I received more emails in the last 3 weeks on a bill that was being proposed by freshman Representative Fred Costello. And it was so misrepresented. The emails that I received said that you're trying to cut my retirement. Retirees were saying this. In fact, it did not affect current people on retirement. It simply said that we've got to cut $4 billion, and this may be a mechanism where the state has been very generous in paying many of the state employees' pension contribution, and we've got to do something to make sure that that fund is stable, and the people that are not only retired now, but the ones that will be retired in the next few years, the money will be there to pay them.
Do Florida employees, do they pay into their pension fund?
Some do and some do not.
Clay Ford.
The last figures I saw in the most recent briefing we got was that the Florida retirement system's only funded at about 87% of what it would take to satisfy all the obligations. In other words, there's not enough money there to pay the pensions out under the current method that we use. The proposal is basically that we move away from a defined benefit plan where the employee doesn't pay anything into the plan and move more toward a defined contribution plan like most of us have where we work. I have a 401k. I have to pay into that if I expect to have something for retirement. So there are different proposals out there, and I don't have one, but basically they say that for 10 years we had increasing revenues in Florida. For the last 4, we've had declining ones. During that time of increase, we're able to do some things for our employees that we no longer are simply going to be able to do. So the proposal is that everybody pitches in, helps with their own retirement. We want to try to do it in a manner that we don't affect what we've already promised somebody. But new employees coming in need to be prepared to go on the same basis that most people walking around out in the general public have to do, and that is you help pay for your retirement.
State employee pensions, any other comments about what's going on with that? Let's go on to the next question. A viewer wants to know, will this delegation support the new governor in cutting the Department of Corrections budget? If so, will they release prisoners to keep the prisons open? First-time offenders. Will they release prisoners and keep the prison and close the prisons?
As chair of the Department of Criminal Justice, we're actually having hearings right now to where we're looking at the mandates, we're looking at the prison sentences, and does the crime justify the sentence? We're looking at cost-cutting ways in the actual Department of Corrections, such as in the medical field, as far as, someone came up with the idea that prescription drugs that were prescribed for someone on Medicaid that did not use them, they could be returned as long as they were sealed. They could actually go to the prisons. We're looking for, look, when you've got a $4 billion hole to fill, you look under every rock. And I don't think that we're not going to turn prisoners loose that's going to jeopardize anyone's safety. But we may look at alternatives to incarceration, such as monitoring, such as even going to, some drug rehab in lieu of incarceration. If a person, you give them drug rehab, costs you $16 a day. If you incarcerate them, it costs you $42.
Okay. Department of Corrections budget cutting, any other comments about proposals to that?
I'll give you an example, Lloyd, of where Senator Evers makes perfect sense. Senator Bennett and I are sponsoring legislation for vets courts. And what this means is if you have a combat veteran who has had traumatic brain syndrome, who's had severe head or brain injury, and it's combat related, and they come before a judge, we want to give the judge the opportunity to first verify that they are a combat veteran, that this disorder is combat related, and then if they would be qualified for it, to put that individual into a treatment program to help them. Remember, these are veterans who bled for this country. To help them, instead of putting them in a prison or jail that would cost more money. Now, judges would have the discretion to do it, not the requirement to do it. They would take into account, as Senator Evers said, whether this is somebody who would be a danger. But it's a lower cost alternative, and it's also a fairer way of treating our combat veterans. That's the kind of thing that I can support.
Thank you. Clay Ford.
We have to go back, I think, to the basic question, Lloyd, and that is, should we lock up nonviolent criminals? My opinion is that we ought not to. We can't afford to any longer. When we lock somebody up, we're going to spend $18,000 to $40,000 a year for costs of keeping them incarcerated, depending on the level of confinement. We don't spend enough money on rehabilitation programs. We need to be doing that. The question is, do we want to lock up some kid who's smoking pot Sure, we need to lock up the drug pushers. We need to lock up those people who are guilty of sex crimes, child perverts, those kind of things. Those people need to be locked up. They are a danger to society. But white-collar criminals need to be out on the street paying rehabilitation to their victims. We don't serve any purpose to society by locking people up if they're nonviolent offenders. In my opinion, we need to spend money on rehabilitation programs, on drug programs, expand our drug courts as an example. We need to stop looking first at mandatory sentences, and I'm a bit of a hardliner, but we need to get away from mandatory sentences. We tie the hands of our judges so they can't use good judgment. If they have a kid they believe is somebody who ought to be turned out and it can be saved, we ought to give them the latitude to do that. If we pass mandatory sentences, we don't give them an option.
And make that person a part of our society that's contributing instead of a drag. You know, if you're caught with 10 to 12 Lortab, then you're actually sentenced to 3 years in prison and the judge has no discretion. Even though what you are, because you're sentenced as a trafficker, but what you are is you're an addict. And you need to be rehabilitated, you need to be placed into a program, and I can do that for $16 a day in lieu of $42 a day.
Okay, next question has to do with farmers in this area. Farmers coming to farmers market. Some of the bills coming up are not small farmer friendly. Farmers that sell directly to the public, that is. They're being told they have to sell their eggs and meat as pet food. Please pass legislation to make it easier for the small farmer to sell directly to the public.
Well, I think there's a push for that because I feel like that folks are looking for cheaper alternatives and looking for fresher vegetables and milk and meats, and they want to buy it direct from the farm. But what our problem is right now is because of legislation that's on the books that has to be changed. And it's going to have to go through a process. It was brought to us last year. We tried to do it, but it met with too big a hurdle. And so it's going to be a slow process. But ultimately, I feel like that we will get some relief to the small farmers.
Okay, on food-related question, one viewer wants to know, can we get a bill passed for food handlers to be tested for communicable diseases? Does that make sense to you?
Well, it's an interesting question. First of all, the Department of Health at the state level and at the county level have the right and the obligation to go in and inspect restaurants, and if they believe that they can find any evidence of communicable diseases, to take action. So if this listener, if this viewer believes that there is such a danger in any place that she or he is buying food or acquiring prepared food, boy, I'd call the county health department tomorrow. But our problem right now is not that we have too many people getting too many communicable diseases from eating in restaurants. You know, that's not our #1 health problem in the state of Florida right now, but if your listener thinks that's a problem where she or he lives, contact the health department and do so today.
Thank you. Next question. Viewer says, I am very concerned that the policies of the Department of Environmental Protection seem to be viewed as a roadblock to development and jobs creation. We are cautioned about eating the fish from Escambia Bay and Bayou Tahar. Wells from our drinking water have been closed, and the neighborhood has been raised because of pollution. According to the Pensacola News Journal, Escambia and Santa Rosa counties rank in the top 5% of all U.S. counties for releasing of industrial pollution. Do you think this is the time that we should be gutting the DEP?
It's not a time to gut the DEP, but it's a time to look at the Department of Environmental Protection and the Department of Community Affairs, which, by the way, should go out of business and will if a bill that I'm working on passes. And we need to lash the missions of government agencies to the realities of the times. The time that we armored up these agencies with so much authority was at a time when growth management was the #1 economic issue in Florida. Well, now we wish we had some growth to manage. So I think what's more important, I don't heard anybody talk about gutting any departments, but I want to certainly defund DCA, let's make sure that we relook at their mission, and we relook at their authority, so that they're not the agency of no, no, hell no, but they're an agency of here's how we can live together and also protect our environment. The governor has appointed a business person as head of the Department of Environmental Protection. I have every confidence that we're going to see the department change course and be more job friendly, as well as protecting the environment. And frankly, I think it's a false choice when people say we can't do both. Here in Florida, we have to protect our pristine environment, but at the same time, we've got to make sure that moms and dads have jobs.
Okay, you mentioned the defunding of DCA. There was a question, I can't pull it up right now, but someone had asked a question about that. What's the rationale?
Well, the
for
rationale
DCA,
is my
what the
bill, and the
DCA
rationale is that here's an agency that was created to restrain growth, and we don't have to restrain growth right now. We need to try to promote growth. And DCA has kind of grown into an extra layer of planning yeses and nos on top of our state, other state agencies, on top of our county and city authorities and our regional planning groups. I talked to a business person the other day. It took him 5 years to get 5 acres of extraordinarily marginal wetlands traded for 250 acres of mitigation wetlands so that he could create 300 more jobs. That was at Silver Sands Outlet Mall, and that was the DCA. They're standing in the way of progress. They've taken a cultural attitude inside the agency that there's something wrong with people who want to expand their businesses and create jobs. It's time for them to go.
And also, we've got a situation where we have the water management with the ERP bills that we have, this kind of thing, and we actually put a provision in that any of the local governments that wanted to overtake that and take it away from the state that could do it more efficiently. Because let's face it, you know, government that governs best governs least, and allow it to go to the local level. And these are one of the things that I know that some of the counties are looking at, of actually pulling it in-house. And I was speaking with someone today where they told me in 30 days that they could have a building permit, they could have all the permits they needed to actually set up a business and start that business, and be breaking ground within 30 days if they were able to accept this from the water management.
Go ahead, Doug Broxa.
One of the committees that I serve on is rulemaking. And what we're trying to do is determine if the legislation that was passed in present legislation and in past is being reinterpreted by these agencies, and they're making their own rules. That's the primary complaint that I hear, is that there's inflexibility in some of these agencies. When they say no, it's no, no matter what information you give them. And that's just not right, and it frustrates the people, and it causes a great deal of anger against what they're trying to do that's good. So we're going to, in rulemaking, look at some of these rules that's been perpetrated by the agencies and say, was that the legislative intent? If it's not, we're going to pull it back.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Local governments depend on property taxes for operating required functions for the residents. What's your opinion of the governor's statement that property taxes will be reduced? If you agree with this option, from what source can revenue be derived?
I think we're waiting to see how the governor's going to do that. It sounds good, but no one really knows exactly what that means. So hopefully in the next few weeks he's going to send a message to the two houses and say this is how we're going to do it, and then we'll have a chance to debate it at that time.
Okay, Clay Ford.
I had an email communication that told me that the governor has prepared a balanced budget and would submit it to us in about a week. So I'll be anxious to see what that looks like. Perhaps he has a solution for it.
Right. None of you has seen what the governor is actually proposing, that agencies that you cut or do something with the state pensions. Nothing has been put before you. Okay, we're down to our last few minutes, and we like to kind of race through these questions. Thank you very much for sending in so many good questions. We'll try to get through some of these. Back to the guns. Why does Senator Evers think it will help society having everyone walk around carrying a gun?
Well, I'm not saying it's going to help society. I'm just saying it's going to exercise folks' Second Amendment right and give them the opportunity to protect themselves.
Okay, a lot of questions about the health insurance supplement, the pensions. Are the legislators going to cut the health insurance supplement for state retirees?
Well, I think it's all up in the air right now. I think we're, like's been discussed, that we're giving the governor an opportunity to come forward. We know that what the agencies were tasked to do, and that was to cut their budget by 15%. And they made some cuts in some areas that I personally, in some of the agencies, would not have made that cut, but it was their decision. So right now, we're sort of in limbo till we get the governor's budget, and then we start actually reviewing and looking over where those agencies actually made their cuts.
Thank you. Are the legislators, this is from a Crestview viewer, are the legislators willing to take cuts on their own behalf, as we do, in wages and benefits? Clay Ford.
In the past 4 years that I've been in office, we've reduced our pay 4 times. We now make 12% less than we made when I first took office in 2007. We now have just recently had our life insurance reduced. I think we are sharing those cuts.
Okay.
And
Senator
Lloyd,
Gates.
I want to just emphasize, as somebody who has joined in sponsoring those cuts in our own benefits and in our own salaries, we ought to lead by example. Our Senate President, Mike Arenopoulos, cut the budget of the Senate itself, the operating budget of the Senate, by 15%. I'm joining Senator Fasano in sponsoring legislation that would reduce the retirement benefits of state politicians and increase the amount that state politicians have to put in their own retirement. And that's the governor and judges and everybody else. You bet we have to lead from the top.
Okay, another quick question regarding the septic tank law. Is that what's going on with that? That affects a lot of people in Santa Rosa County.
Well, what we're doing is, you know, during the special session, we actually kicked the implementation date off till July the 1st, which gives us an opportunity. I have a bill that does a total repeal of the septic tank issues on Senate Bill 550, Senator Gates sponsored. Also, there's some other bills out there that virtually does the same. I'm hearing from even our local government saying, look, if nothing else, exempt out the panhandle or give us the authority that we can cover the septic tanks ourselves.
Okay, just about the last question here. There's a couple of viewers are concerned they have been trouble getting their emails, you responding to the emails that they send you. What's the best way if a person wants to contact Clay Ingram or Greg Evers? What's the best way for a constituent to get a hold of you? Email you? Or
Absolutely. Well, in my personal case, the myfloridahouse.gov is the House website. It's easy to access the representatives, and you can pull each of us up individually, and you can contact us directly through the website. And I know that's something I focus on, is being responsive, and I think others do as well.
do you answer every single email that comes in, or would you ever get anything else done if you did?
I tell you, I answer every email myself. I read and answer emails myself that come from people who live in Northwest Florida. But when I get 3,000 emails from Dade County about an issue that affects them, that's basically the same email and it's just generated by a special interest group, I send them back a standard email response. I don't say thanks for your email and I'll read it later. We send them back a response. But if you're from Northwest Florida and you email Don Gates, I'll be sitting up at night in my bedroom, maybe 4 o'clock in the morning when you get a response, but you'll get a response and it'll be from me.
Okay. Senators Gates and Evers, thank you very much for being here. Representatives Ford and Broxson and Ingram, good luck to you as in the state capitol come March. We'll be hearing a lot more about what you'll be up to. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all the good questions you sent in. I'm Lloyd Patterson for WSRE. Good day.